Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about a rig that I used to throw when I was a small child and caught so many bass in all the ponds by my house. It's gone by the wayside. I've thrown some other rigs as of recently. I learned more bass fishing techniques, but it's made its way back around through my tournament fishing. I've seen this rig come back up in some tournaments that I've fished, and today we're going to talk about that, and that is going to be the ringworm. So this is going to seem like a fairly basic technique. It is not advanced whatsoever, but I promise you this thing will catch bass when nothing else will. It is a super effective technique. I used to throw this thing when I was like 8-10 years old, fishing little ponds by my house that got a ton of pressure. I would always catch fish on this bait, and I would catch a ton of them compared to any other bait that I would throw. Throughout my tournament fishing, I ended up back at the James River, and it's a very tough fishery sometimes, especially throughout the summer and fall months. And this bait made another appearance, and one of my best days of the tournament actually came throwing the ringworm. I was throwing it at submerged wood. That wood had been fished by everybody else, but using this bait, super finesse-like, was able to get me some more bites that allowed me to catch some more fish. So we're going to talk about this rig today. Specifically, on a Texas rig is the way I like to fish it. Now technically the ringworm is a bait and not a rig, but I specifically like to fish mine on a Texas rig like I have here, and I also like to fish it on an unpegged Texas rig, as you can see here. So number one way that I like to rig this bait, people like to use slider heads and stuff like that. I don't like to do that because some of those slider heads don't come with very good hooks in them, so I kind of make a rig myself. It is just a Texas rig, but I use a 1/8 ounce Texas rig weight here, just a regular tungsten. You could use lead. The lighter the better. You want to go under 3/16 of an ounce. You can go up to 1/4 if you wanted to, and I'll show you some of the bait options here in a minute, which ones I'd like to throw a 1/4 ounce on just because they're a little bit bigger. But if you're throwing the traditional ringworm, which is just a 4-inch bait with a tiny curly tail on the back, you only need an 1/8, maybe a 3/16 ounce to get that thing down there. So I throw a 1/8 ounce weight. I throw a 2-aught Gamakatsu Superline hook. I don't like the regular wire just because I tend to straighten some hooks out. So I do throw the Superline, even on a spinning rod, which we'll talk about in rod selection here. And then your final selection of what you need is your ringworm. So there's a few different options, which we'll talk about here right now. This one right here is just the Zoom Dead Ringer. I absolutely love this one. You get 20 of them for like $3, catch a ton of fish on them. That's why I used to fish them all the time. They were super cheap and super effective and caught me a ton of fish. This one's the Junebug Chartreuse. I kind of like the chartreuse tail sometimes. It's kind of like a nostalgia thing for me. The ones that I used to fish were green pumpkin with a chartreuse tail, and I always caught fish on them when I was like 8 years old, so I just continue to throw it even though I'm much older now. It still catches fish, it just works. But we'll show you some of the other bait options here that are out on the market. Some are a little bit harder to find, but they work very well, so let's jump right into it. So like I said, there's a few options of what you can pick here. Color-wise, green pumpkin, black and blue, really whatever you want. Pick your favorite color, whatever you have the most confidence in. I promise they'll all work. It's more about just putting it in front of a fish's face and having a finesse profile rather than the color that you're using. The one we already talked about was the Zoom Dead Ringer. That's this one right here. Like I said, comes in a 20-pack, really cheap. Catch a bunch of fish on that. Another version of that bait, if you can find it, this is the James River Special one. It is very, very hard to find. I had to go into a hole-in-the-wall bait shop to find one of these down at the James River. I don't even think you can order these online, and they're called the Mud Puppy Custom Lures. This is also a ringworm, 4-inch ringworm. This is a color called Moccasin Blue. Really like this color, but if you can find any of the other colors as well, just grab them. They're awesome. Again, I believe they come 20-pack as well, so they come in the same pack quantity. It's pretty much an equivalent to the Dead Ringer, but this is just a local guy that makes them down by the James River. They work just slightly better. They're not amazing, but they are, if you can get your hands on them, try and get these over the Zoom Dead Ringer. And then two other options here. These are going to be the 3/16 to a 1/4 ounce bait. This was actually the one that I did really well on at the James River, and that is the Zoom G-Tail Ringer. So it's not the same as the ringworm. It's not a very slim profile with a tiny little tail. It has a little bit larger tail on the back and a fatter head. So you can put the hook in there a little bit better. it has a little bit bigger tail that causes some more resistance, so you can go with a little bit bigger weight. I was actually throwing this on 12-pound test on a bait caster, but you can use this on the spinning rods as well. But that's a very good one. And then again, the Mud Puppy, they also have a version of that as well. This is called the Pulsator Worm, 4-inch Pulsator Worm. It's literally the same thing. Has the fatter head with the bigger tail on the back. It's the equivalent of the Zoom G-Tail Ringer. So those are the two that I like. Whether you buy the Zoom versions or whether you buy these Mud Puppy versions, if you, like I said, if you can get your hands on these, they're great. They add a little scent in the bags. They catch just a couple more fish, I believe, but the Zoom ones will work just fine if you can't find these where you live. And then, like I said, for rod selection, I keep it really simple. Again, I used to fish this thing on a spinning rod when I was a kid, and everyone still fishes it on a spinning rod. I've just upgraded the equipment a little bit. So I have a Shimano Sedona 2500 on here. If you want, use braided line. I have 15-pound braid to about a 10-foot section of 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. That will work just fine. The way that these guys fish it down at the James River is straight fluorocarbon. I do not like straight fluorocarbon. You lose a little bit of sensitivity. I like the braid a little bit better, but you can throw 8 or 10-pound test straight fluorocarbon on your spinning reel and fish this technique. I'll throw the braid, allows me to see better. Fish picks that bait up, something like that. And then for a rod, this is a custom built one that I have here. This is literally just a 6'9" medium action. So short rod, accurate cast, has some backbone, has a sensitive tip. That's all I'm looking for. That is the simplest setup that you could ever use for a ringworm right there. I did fish it on a 7-foot medium action bait caster with 12-pound test straight fluorocarbon when I was throwing the G-tail ringer, but you could throw the G-tail ringer on this as well. It's still a super finesse bait. I would literally just change this weight to a 3/16, keep the same hook, put a G-tail ringer on there, you're good to go. Same exact setup. So I love throwing them on a spinning rod. As for fishing this bait, all you're going to do is make a super accurate cast to whatever you're fishing. I'm going to target the most obvious pieces of cover. If I see a log laying down in the water, something very obvious, a dock all by itself, whatever is good on your lake, whatever you think, oh, there should be a bass there, fish high percentage areas, cast this thing super accurate to wherever you're throwing it. It lands gently, it's not going to spook any fish, and then just slowly drag it on the bottom like you would any other Texas rig. And this little curl tail is going to do all the work. It's going to draw that fish in. It'll do a little bit more than a Senko will. I promise you this thing will catch fish. It works amazing when that fishing is very, very tough. Just something different. Everyone can throw Senkos. Everyone can throw other stuff. This is just something that not a lot of people throw, but still does the same purpose as any other Texas rig bait. So I've started mixing it into my arsenal ever since I fished that tournament recently, and I had a little success with it. I've realized how effective this bait was when I was a kid and how effective it can be now. So I continue to throw it throughout all my fishing. Whenever I'm really tough, can't get a bite, this is usually what comes out. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video talking about this ringworm. It catches a ton of fish all over the country. Give it a shot on your local body of water and you'll be catching more fish in no time. If you want to see another rig that works when the fishing's really tough, go ahead and check this video out right here. Hit that subscribe button down below, and thanks for watching.